So what went wrong for England in the first test of the autumn series? So I think everybody expected Argentina to turn up and it to be a competitive game. To be honest, I thought England, off the back of a good series in Australia, given that they're at home, Argentina coming off a long tour, I did think England would probably win the game. I thought it'd be close, but I did think England would win the game. And to be honest, based on the possession, I was thinking the whole game that England will pull away at some point, given that their strength in depth and that they had, basically most of their players fit. I think there's a couple of things that were quite frustrating watching it as a fan. I know Eddie Jones has come out since the game and said he can't really put his finger on it, but there's some sort of fundamental things that as a fan is quite frustrating. I think the big thing for me was the simple errors, like handling errors, but they weren't just errors where occur when a team is just trucking the ball up. England seemed to do this when they'd actually gain that momentum. So all that momentum they're always striving for. I think the perfect example was in the first half. They did a strike play. Ben Youngs got the ball and then threw the ball into touch. And you think, well, that was off the second phase that they're constantly training for. They'd got that front foot ball. I think Manu or someone had taken the ball up. And they did that. I mean, Billy Vunipola in the first half, I think, dropped the ball 3 times. Yeah, I understand it was wet, but again, it was at the times when England had that momentum. You do wonder, if those balls stick and they continue to get that momentum, whether there was been opportunities there. So I think really that's probably fundamentally why they could lose a game without having so much possession and with the penalty count being so equal. I think that's the interesting thing. It's not like England conceded more penalties than Argentina, but if you're going to make simple handling errors, and just give the ball back, then really, they're the team that have to do it. And I don't think it was from the pressure. I think it's all really the game was summed up by in that 79th minute when Slade, dropped the ball. Yes, I know there's a bit more pressure given that England needed to score, but actually he takes a really good line and most of the time he'll catch that and he drops it. So I think, there's sort of simple errors. The coaches are coming into criticism, I understand that, but actually, I just think that simple errors like that are just stunting the England momentum. I think equally, the other thing is we touched on the penalty count. So the penalty count in the game, I believe, was, I think, 10 penalties all. The problem is though, that England were conceding those penalties under no stress. We've already talked about, I think, the possession, Argentina's possession was like 37% and territory, I don't know, I think they spent probably a third of the time in England's half. But I think I never felt as a fan sitting there thinking England were under particular stress. It wasn't like Argentina were building phase after phase and therefore you were committing penalties. There wasn't really a lot of competition at the breakdown. So a lot of England's penalties were just, simple things for like offside. People are focused in on Luke Cowan-Dickey's late challenge. I think those things happen, but things like offside just not getting organised. And it's not from that you're, having to provide some sort of rush defence. I don't know. You shouldn't really be giving away lots of penalties if you don't really have that ball or you're not making many tackles. It just seemed a little bit odd to me. And again, it goes back to a little bit like the 2001 Six Nations. And interestingly, who was the captain then? Owen Farrell. Now, it's no criticism, but then you've got to look at the patterns. And is it that Farrell is the captain and he's therefore not, he's a bit further away from maybe the pack and he's not able to say to them, look, guys, you stop making these silly errors and giving away these silly penalties and we're not under stress for that? Or is it something else? I don't know. Because we did seem to be a little bit more adaptable in Australia. I think a couple of times we came under pressure and we seemed to change the way we approached it and ride that storm. I felt against Argentina, we didn't really ever get under pressure, but we seemed to kind of make it worse for us. So it's a very odd game in that sense. So I think simple things of, in that position, England probably just need to sort of cool off. They weren't really under stress. They don't need to commit anything. And as I say, a lot of the penalties it'd be interesting to go back through and look at them because most of them weren't breakdown penalties. They weren't like, being over the ball or rolling away. They were kind of things like offside and, simple late tackles or crossing, those type of things, which is just a bit of a, things that you can kind of coach out of the game. And then I think the other thing, which again, I saw this myself, but I have since heard other commentators and pundits talk about is the lack of speed. But if you look back on my other videos, this is something I talk about a lot. I think it has quite a lot of benefits that for England to have some speed in the team. I think one of the things is at the moment you see, and I've seen this in the last couple of series from Six Nations, England do get wide, they do create a little bit of space, but probably if we put the Australia series to the side, in these other matches, what happens is we get a player out wide, but they don't have that raw speed to actually stress the defence. So either they come back in or they take contact. And I think there was 2 occasions where Cokanasiga got the ball out wide. We got the ball to him wide, and he just doesn't have that, sheer pace to be able to really push defences and therefore create that scramble. And that's not taking anything away from him. I think for a man who actually had to come out and prove himself following that first test in Australia, I think he actually got involved in the play. I think Katugi's try well. There's a lot to be said about he's a big man, but actually he had to twist and then he had to do the finish. And I think sometimes just because they're big doesn't mean that they're always going to score. So I think, he had the awareness to actually know where the line was and use his body effectively. So fair play to him. But I don't know if you can have both him and Jack Nowell. And I'm both big fans of both players, but I still think, and partly that is because, again, Freddie Stewart, who I think is potentially one of the best in the world at what he does, but he's being a big man, he's not got that out and out pace. And I think England need that from somewhere. Now, I imagine there was probably thoughts around playing Henry Arundel in the series. Obviously, he's got injured. But we've got players in the system. We've got players like Radwan, who, again, doesn't seem to get a look in. But even people like Hassel Collins, Murley, they would probably give you, and Johnny May potentially, although whether he's fit, they give you that ability because they back themselves to try and take teams on. And I think that would need it. I think also that benefits if we're trying to play this system where Farrell and Smith play in the hole and play behind. At the moment, when you get outside that third defender, you really don't have that pace to sort of actually make that work well. You've got Stewart hitting the line, and he will break tackles, but there's not that kind of out and out pace to actually get behind the defence. So I think really that comes down to selection, and I think back in a few players that maybe they have some. So taking Adam Radwan, for instance, he has potentially some issues with his game that could be improved, but maybe we focus less on the bad things and think, well, what can he bring to this team? And what he can bring to this team is, out and out speed. He's a little bit unpredictable. And I mean, actually looking at his finish on the weekend, I mean, there's not many players in rugby across the world that will finish like that. I mean, it's one of those kind of, you might occasionally see things like that in rugby league. I mean, he's so aerobatical, but that's, a fantastic try. So I think it's just frustrating from an England team. I think this series should have been about trying to win games, particularly being at Twickenham. And with a relatively strong team, you've got players that they've been wanting to pick, like Manu and stuff, for a while. So I think England need to look at these things going forward. I think we need to take the Japanese game a lot more seriously than perhaps we would have done. I don't think we need to be resting anybody. I think we need to go full noise into those matches. And let's hope this is the sort of catalyst to, effectively picking up the scalps of New Zealand and South Africa, which, if we look at the big picture, if England go on to win the next 3 matches, then that is a successful series. If they lose another game and you get a 50% win record, I'm not sure that's great. And I suppose the concern now is that, you're playing a Japanese team who have pushed New Zealand, who will play a different style of game. And you could then be looking at, a loss of 3 or even 4, which is potentially a little bit daunting for an English fan looking forward to the World Cup in less than a year's time. So they're just my thoughts from watching the game yesterday. As always, I love watching England play. It's just hopefully they can get a little bit more cohesion and just get rid of those simple errors. And I think there's the foundations there. You just need to sort of get it clicking again. So I'll be doing another video soon. Look out for that. And please do subscribe and check out the other videos. Take care. Bye-bye.